These are bewildering and disjointed days, especially for the young.
My life changed because I can't go outside.
We have to be careful to not get sick.
An Oxford University study found that 1 in 5 children are now afraid to leave their homes.
A sense of disorientation and confusion, I think, would have been a very understandable, natural, ordinary reaction that a lot of children have had.
In the past few weeks, secure mental health units have been forced to discharge large numbers of patients.
There are children suffering from psychosis who believe the virus is a conspiracy, others with eating disorders or histories of self-harm.
We fear that we're going to have a time bomb now that is building up to a major mental health epidemic.
The world's attention is on controlling the virus, but there are countless hidden victims. Even when the pandemic passes, there will be many in desperate need of help.
What has Zambia been doing with the money that it's borrowed?
We bring you the stories and developments that are rapidly changing the world we live in.
Argentina's Congress is debating a bill seeking to raise billions of dollars from the super rich to support families hit hard by the pandemic.
Counting the cost on Aljazeera.
US regulators approved the Moderna vaccine for emergency use, the second within a week, but the pandemic is far from being contained. Hello, I'm Darren Jordan. This is Al Jazeera, live from Doha. Also coming up, Brazil's Supreme Court rules taking the vaccine can be made compulsory, but that's at odds with the president's defiant stance on immunization. A former governor in Mexico's Jalisco state becomes the latest victim of drug-related violence that's spiraling out of control. And a Hindu woman in India recounts her horrific ordeal under a new law aimed at preventing forced religious conversions. US regulators have approved a second coronavirus vaccine, and mass inoculations expected to start within days. Tests show the Moderna jab is more than 94% effective when administered in 2 doses, 4 weeks apart. Its approval came just hours after the Vice President, Mike Pence, was given the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine live on TV in a bid to build support for the rollout. Alan Fisher begins our coverage from the White House.
All right.
This was a very public vote of confidence in the coronavirus vaccine. The Vice President, his wife and the US Surgeon General getting an injection live on TV. They want to assure Americans that the vaccine works and it's safe.
The American people deserve to know that we've never been more prepared to combat the coronavirus than we are today. And even while we see cases rising and hospitalizations rising and heartbreaking losses, we'll continue to marshal the resources that we have secured as a nation, including a safe and effective vaccine, to meet this moment.
Senior members of the White House coronavirus team were also at the event. The most recognisable, Dr. Anthony Fauci, insisting the vaccine's finally providing a light at the end of what's been a very long tunnel.
As we get into January, February, March and April, that light is going to get brighter and brighter. And the bitterness is going to be replaced by the sweetness. And we all hope, and I think this is doable, that by the time we get to several months into this year, we will have enough people protected that we can start thinking seriously about the return to normality.
Not at the event in the old Executive Office building, right next door to the White House itself. The President, instead, he was tweeting out allegations without proof that the presidential election had been stolen from him. His spokesperson says he's open to getting the vaccine. There are just no plans to do that at the moment. For the second Friday in a row, regulators in the US approved a vaccine, the Food and Drug Administration giving emergency use authorization to Moderna. That'll mean 6 million doses being sent out in the coming days. And because the drug doesn't have to be stored at extreme low temperatures, it can be used in more locations, more than 3,000 initially. But while the vaccines provide some good news, the scale of the problem in the US is actually growing. More than 3,000 deaths a day in recent days, hospitalizations at record numbers, health providers across all 50 states warning they're close to breaking point. And with families planning to gather in a week for the Christmas holiday, experts are worried that'll create another deadly spike that will cast a shadow into the new year. Alan Fisher, Al Jazeera, at the White House.
Well, let's go live to our White House correspondent, Kimberly Halkett in Washington, D.C. Kimberly, so how long will it take then for Americans to start getting this Moderna vaccine, and who'll be first in line to get the jab?
Well, we know based on the Pfizer vaccine that was approved a week ago that it is healthcare workers who are on the front line of fighting this pandemic, as well as those that have been most impacted by the deaths, the elderly in the United States, particularly residents in care homes. But we're going to get a better sense of the distribution on Saturday. We know the Pentagon that is coordinating much of this is going to be holding a briefing along with the Health and Human Services Agency to discuss the distribution in more detail. But what we're expecting is that the first doses, which are already on standby, will be rolling out on Monday and soon after be delivered to the states where they can be injected into those that need it most. Now, in the midst of all of this, we've had reaction from the U.S. President Donald Trump. He has tweeted that the Moderna vaccine is now available. Congratulations. President-elect Joe Biden releasing a statement in the last few moments as well, saying that this is another milestone in overcoming this global pandemic. He assures that brighter days are ahead with not one but two vaccines now available to millions of Americans. But at the same time, he says that there are still challenges ahead. He is going to be inaugurated January 20th when he will be inheriting all of this. And he promises that in his first 100 days, that in fact there will be 100 million vaccines given to Americans that need it.
And Kimberly, how has all of this shaped public opinion? I mean, we've seen politicians, Mike Pence, taking the jab live on TV. But how worried then are ordinary Americans about just how fast these vaccines have been developed and what sort of side effects they may have?
There's a lot of concern in the United States, and so that's why the Food and Drug Administration, shortly after approving this, held a press call to try and reassure Americans that the most vigorous of debates was held over the scientific data before this was approved, and also that the process itself is the gold standard when it comes to approvals, not just in the United States, but across the world. Still, we know that there are millions of Americans that are fearful, particularly communities of color. Why? Well, with good reason, because we know a lot of these trials, although they were done on thousands of people, many of the groups of testing or sort of individuals were not individuals that reflect the United States and all of its diversity. And we know that there's already distrust in the communities of color who have, we should also mention, been hardest hit in the United States by this pandemic. So they're wary, and so there's a lot of work to be done in reassuring. And I can tell you that having the politicians, even if they are bipartisan, because we know Nancy Pelosi, the House Speaker, has also been vaccinated, Americans don't trust their politicians. So that's hardly the reassurance they're looking for. They feel that the politicians lie to them all the time. So why wouldn't they be lying about this vaccine too? So you can see the challenges here. But in the midst of all of this, what I can tell you is that, in fact, this is going forward. And the goal is to try and have millions of Americans vaccinated by the middle of June. That is when they feel that they'll be able to approach not the 70 to 80 of herd immunity, but at least the benchmark of trying to get things back to normal.
Kimberly, thank you. Well, Wafa El-Sadr is a professor of epidemiology and medicine at Columbia University. She says the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are very similar.
There are very few differences between these two vaccines. I think there are more similarities certainly than differences. They work equally well, and they also have a very similar safety profile. They both require 2 doses to be vaccinated. I think some subtle differences, like, for example, the Pfizer vaccine The second dose is given about 3 weeks after the first dose, while the Moderna vaccine, the second dose is given after 4 weeks. And another difference is that the Moderna vaccine does not require the level of freezing or the cold temperature that as much as the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine does. So it will make it a bit easier to distribute the Moderna vaccine than the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. Yeah, Moderna is a much smaller company. It's a new company and is not like a well-established pharmaceutical company like Pfizer. But on the other hand, Moderna will benefit from distribution that will be done through support from the U.S. government. The Operation Warp Speed, which is the operation that's shepherded the development of these vaccines, will be responsible for the distribution of the Moderna vaccine in the United States.
Well, the World Health Organization has warned that the next 3 to 6 months will be tough during the wait for coronavirus vaccines to help reduce transmission. Its Health Emergencies Director says countries with a high number of cases should still expect their infection rates to rise, particularly in the Americas.
Over 3/4 of the cases, we're seeing globally now are occurring in the Americas. It's a very, very high and intense period there. And it really does come back to being able to implement all of the measures that are needed, having strong coordination and governance, having a do-it-all approach in terms of both public health and social measures, advice to people on wearing masks and personal hygiene, and having a very strong focus on surveillance and testing.
Well, let's bring in Dr. George C. Benjamin. He's Executive Director of the American Public Health Association and joins us live via Skype from Washington, D.C. George, good to have you with us here in Al Jazeera. Now, so despite the speed with which this vaccine's been approved, politicians and health officials like yourself in the U.S. will presumably be breathing a sigh of relief, won't they?
Oh, absolutely. This is a great awakening, and we're really excited about the fact that we have this new tool to add to the other public health tools we have to try to ultimately bring an end to this pandemic.
So just talk us through how different this Moderna vaccine is to the already approved Pfizer-BioNTech one.
I think the biggest difference, because they're both mRNA vaccines, but the biggest difference is the fact that you don't have to keep it as cold. So that means we can get it into rural communities and to inner city communities and places where they just have a regular refrigerator versus the ultra cold storage that's required for the Pfizer vaccine. So it'll allow us to vaccinate more people.
George, is there a worry that Moderna, which is a small company, may have problems with scaling up and distributing the vaccine, whereas Pfizer, as we know, is a global pharmaceutical with well-developed distribution channels?
Well, Pfizer is certainly a giant in the pharmaceutical area, and particularly with vaccines. But Moderna has had support from the federal government and funding. But it always remains to be seen because production is a big deal. But we're confident that Moderna can do it. They've, they were very much first out of the box in terms of trying to get this vaccine in place. So hopefully they'll be able to produce all the vaccine that we requested.
George, let me ask you for a second to gaze into your crystal ball, if I may. The pandemic has caused a huge disruption to everyone's lives all around the world. How do you see life after the vaccine? What will the new normal look like?
Well, I think we're going to have a steady increase in vaccine, and that will be accompanied with reductions in morbidity, people getting sick, and people dying. I think over time, our society will be able to return to normal. And we're looking forward to having a very robust summer here in the United States. So I'm optimistic that we'll be able to get back to normal by this summer.
Dr. George Benjamin, great to get your thoughts. Thank you for talking to us here at Al Jazeera. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren.
Now, Brazil's president has tried to cast doubt on coronavirus vaccines, making unfounded claims about their side effects. Earlier, the Supreme Court ruled that vaccination can be made compulsory, but Jair Bolsonaro has repeatedly said he won't be taking one. No vaccines have been approved for use in Brazil, despite a surge in infections and deaths.
Na Pfizer, está bem claro lá no contrato.
It's clear in the contract with Pfizer, we are not responsible for any side effects. If you become an alligator, that's your problem. I'm not going to mention another animal because you'll think I'm talking nonsense, right? If you become a Superman, if any woman grows a beard, or any man starts singing soprano, then they have nothing to do with it.
Time for a short break here in Al Jazeera. When we come back, overflowing morgues force one German city to use containers for its coronavirus victims. And hungry and traumatized, a kidnapping ordeal ends for hundreds of schoolboys in Nigeria. More on that. Stay with us.
Hello, a good deal quieter now across the eastern seaboard of the US. I'm pleased to say you can see this massive cloud. That is what remains of our nor'easter, that snowmaker that's fed in across the eastern side of the US, now pulling away from Newfoundland, that eastern side of Canada. So things quietening down quite nicely as we go on through Saturday, which will be a crisp day. 1 or 2 Celsius there for New York and for DC. Another area of cloud and rain and snow affecting Quebec, pulling down across the lakes down into the deep south. Some very heavy rain there into that eastern side of Texas, pushing into Louisiana. That's all going to make its way further eastwards. Gradually, it'll push towards the eastern seaboard. We'll see the thaw getting underway here as we go on through Sunday, as those temperatures slowly but surely start to pick up. But there's more snow behind. We'll see snow just around the prairies, pushing up to that western side of Canada. Some wet weather there into Washington State. Further south it is generally fine and dry across California, down into New Mexico and indeed into Mexico. Bit of wet weather there, just pushing across northern parts of Cuba for a time, but across much of the Caribbean, it looks good over the next day or so. There'll be a few showers into the windwards and the leewards for a time, but I suspect it's a case of more sunshine than showers.
The COVID-19 pandemic is threatening one of Singapore's most loved traditions, its famous street stalls.
The pressure is on.
101 East investigates if hawkers can innovate to survive. On Al Jazeera.
Al Jazeera, wherever you are.
Welcome back. A quick reminder of our top stories here this hour. US regulators have approved a second coronavirus vaccine for emergency use. The rollout of millions of doses of the Moderna vaccine is expected to begin this weekend. Tests show it's more than 94% effective when given in 2 doses 4 weeks apart. News came just hours after US Vice President Mike Pence was inoculated with the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine that was approved last week. President-elect Joe Biden will do the same on Monday. Politicians are getting their jabs in public to boost confidence in the vaccination process. Now, in Europe, the second wave of COVID-19 shows no sign of slowing. Italy is being placed under a nationwide lockdown over both Christmas and New Year, with bars, restaurants and non-essential shops closing. Austria's government is imposing a third lockdown, while in Germany, temporary freezers are being used to store bodies after a spike in coronavirus deaths overwhelmed hospitals. Rory Challens reports.
In the German city of Hanau, they've run out of space for bodies in the hospital morgues. A cool shipping container is being used to temporarily handle the overflow.
Unfortunately, the situation in Hanau has changed. We now need to make use of our containers that we have had here since April, initially as a precaution. Since yesterday, 2 COVID-19 deceased are here. In total, 25 deceased can be stored in the container, and sadly, we had to start using the container from yesterday.
With a record of nearly 34,000 new cases and 813 new deaths, Germany has lost its position as a role model for how to handle the pandemic well, though vaccinations are set to start after Christmas.
The imminent probable approval of the first vaccine naturally gives us hope, but obviously it won't solve the problem. And realistically, we need to be prepared that the months of January and February will be the hardest months of this pandemic.
Several European countries are deep in the grip of a second or perhaps even third wave of coronavirus. French President Emmanuel Macron continues his isolation after catching it.
Continuez vraiment à faire attention.
Continue to be careful. On Thursday, I tested positive, which shows that the virus can really affect anyone because I am very protected. I am very careful, I respect distancing, I wear a mask, I regularly use hand sanitizer, and in spite of everything, I caught the virus. Surely due to a moment of inattention or a bit of bad luck. But that's the way it is.
Senior French government scientific advisor says vaccine rollout could take longer than thought. Don't expect a return to normal before late next year, Jean-François Delfrécy has warned. With more than 15,000 people in the UK currently hospitalised for coronavirus, the country is approaching the first wave peak of 18,000 hospitalisations. In any normal year, central London would be teeming with Christmas shoppers. But this, as we know, is no normal year. Londoners are among the 38 million people across the United Kingdom currently living under the toughest of the 3 coronavirus restriction tiers. Yes, there's a temporary relaxation for Christmas itself, so families can get together. But in many parts of the country, after that, the shutters are coming down again, and they're coming down harder. The cheer generated by being the first country to administer the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine has worn off already. Stopping the National Health Service becoming overwhelmed has again become a top priority. Rory Challens, Al Jazeera, London.
The US Congress has managed to temporarily avoid a government shutdown. It's approved a 2-day extension of funding to keep agencies operating until Sunday. That's as Republicans and Democrats try to resolve sticking points on a $900 billion coronavirus relief package. They're hoping to approve it over the weekend after months of stalemate. A week after they were kidnapped from a school in Nigeria, more than 300 boys are now being reunited with their families. Parents in the northern state of Katsina celebrated as they saw their sons for the first time since they were taken. 344 were kidnapped from their school last Friday by armed men on motorbikes. Details of their rescue are still not clear, including who was responsible and whether a ransom was paid. Some of the boys say they were beaten daily by their captors.
To be honest, there was no food or water for us, no shelter, no break. And the Friday we were taken, we spent 2 days without sleep. Our food was leaves, and after 2 days without food, we were given fresh potatoes and pieces of groundnut cake.
Frankly speaking, I feel like God has granted me paradise because I'm so happy. After spending 2 days without eating anything, my mother is more than 90 years old and I am her last born, and she too stopped eating and drinking. In addition, my 3 sisters were admitted to hospital.
Well, more now from Al Jazeera's Ahmed Idris, who's in the city of Katsina.
Walking barefoot, some of them limping, the 344 schoolboys are led by Nigerian security forces to the safe environment of the governor's office in Katsina after nearly a week in captivity. Instead of joy, it's fear and exhaustion written on their young faces.
You suffered physically, mentally, psychologically. But let me assure you that we have suffered more. Your parents have suffered more.
The government says all the students abducted in an armed raid on a boarding school in the town of Kankara last week have now been freed. But it's yet to explain the circumstances leading to their release.
A quick intervention prevented Nigeria's largest mass abduction from turning into another Chibok disaster. In 2014, security experts say Nigeria's authorities failed to act quickly when Boko Haram took more than 270 students from a girls' secondary school in Chibok. More than 100 of them are still unaccounted for.
For 6 days, the students were forced to trek and hike until Nigerian security forces pinned down their abductors in a forest in nearby Zamfara state. Earlier, hundreds more students either escaped on their own or were helped by the military, and many in a poor state of health. 14-year-old Osama Aminu managed to make his own way to freedom, but the punishing trek across forests and rocky hills has left him now fighting for his life. He is bedridden because of sickle cell anemia, made worse by this experience. His father is desperately worried about his health.
He said he was propped up and helped along by fellow students as they marched through a thick forest. When their group was rested for a few minutes, he saw a chance to escape. He crawled away and hid behind a tree. Later, he dragged himself to a village where he was brought home on a motorcycle.
Kankara Secondary School, from where the boys were taken, is now shut, just like schools in 3 other states in Nigeria's northwest. The authorities are taking no chances there could be further such raids. Nigeria's security forces are overstretched. They are fighting many battles, including against the armed group Boko Haram, who are against Western-style education. But eventually, the government will want the schools to reopen. Ahmed Idris, Aljazeera, Katsina, Nigeria.
A former governor of the Mexican state of Jalisco was shot dead early on Friday in the beach town of Puerto Vallarta. It's the latest in a series of violent acts in a country already plagued by drug-related gang activity. Al Jazeera's John Holman has more.
This video apparently records the moment when the ex-governor of the Mexican state of Jalisco was killed in a restaurant. Aristoteles Sandoval was holidaying in the resort town of Puerto Vallarta. He was out with 3 other people and a 15-strong bodyguard team provided by the state who couldn't save him.
The attack happened at 1:40 in the morning. The ex-governor got up from the table and went to the bathroom. That's where an armed man shot him in the back.
Killings have become common at local level in Mexican politics, but the murder of an ex-governor is still very unusual. The investigation into who was behind the attack is just beginning, but it's not going to be easy. That's because, the state attorney said, the staff from the restaurant cleaned up the crime scene, took away evidence and even removed security cameras. Jalisco State, in the southwest of the country, is the heartland of one of Mexico's most powerful criminal groups, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. This is one of the videos they've released showing their firepower, and they've not been afraid to turn it on authorities before. This assassination could mark the start of a real season of political violence in Mexico, and that's because next July the country's holding its biggest ever elections. And in the run-up to elections in the country is usually the point where criminal groups try to position their own candidates, and they often do that by murdering rival ones. Aristoteles Sandoval, former governor of Jalisco, will likely not be the last to die. John Holman, Al Jazeera, Mexico City.
There's increasing controversy in India over attempts to curb interfaith marriage. In one high-profile case, a Hindu woman says she had a miscarriage because police separated her from her Muslim husband. Her state, Uttar Pradesh, is the latest to pass a law making it more difficult for people from different religions to marry. Our India correspondent, Elizabeth Puranam, reports from Moradabad.
Pinky Kumari is recovering at home after what she describes as a traumatic couple of weeks. Her husband and brother-in-law have been detained by police, and she says she suffered a miscarriage while in government care.
I had pain for 3 days, so I was admitted to the hospital on the 11th. I was given injections, then my situation got worse. There was a lot of bleeding and I had a miscarriage.
Pinky and her husband Rashid's ordeal began when they went to register their Islamic marriage ceremony with the state government. They were harassed outside court by a group of Hindu nationalists because Pinky had converted from Hinduism to Islam. The couple married in July before the government in the state of Uttar Pradesh passed an order which makes it illegal for people to change their religion for the sake of marriage. Police are detaining Rashid and his brother Salim while they investigate whether they forced Pinky to convert, and Pinky was taken to a government-run women's shelter. The hospital which treated her told Al Jazeera they only gave her injections to help with her pain and light bleeding.
We didn't give her any injection that would lead to a miscarriage. We gave her the best treatment we could, according to her symptoms, and managed the situation conservatively, so it's wrong to say this.
While it's unclear what caused Pinky's miscarriage, what is certain is she was separated from her husband because of the new law.
The Uttar Pradesh government issued the anti-conversion order last month, citing a campaign by Muslim men to forcibly convert Hindu women. That's despite the fact no state or central government department, including the National Commission of Women, has found any evidence of such cases.
Human rights lawyer Vrinda Grover says the Bharatiya Janata Party or BJP passes such laws to divide Indians. She's preparing to challenge it in court.
The BJP very openly projects itself as a right-wing Hindu party. What we are noticing here is that this is actually part of a political agenda, an agenda both to polarize and terrorize communities.
Pinky says she's worried about her future and also Rashid's and Salim's.
I want my husband and brother-in-law to come back. I ask the government to release them. I'm really worried. I've lost my child, but please let my husband go.
But with 4 other BJP-ruled states in the process of passing similar orders, more couples are expected to be criminalized for falling in love and marrying people outside their religion. Elizabeth Puranam, Muradabad, Uttar Pradesh.
Prosecutors in the United States are urging a federal judge to reject a nearly $13 million bail deal for Ghislaine Maxwell. The former associate of Jeffrey Epstein has pleaded not guilty to charges of helping him recruit and groom underage girls to engage in illegal sex acts. Prosecutors say Maxwell should remain behind bars because the evidence against her is strong and she poses an extreme flight risk. A U.S. congressional report has found that Boeing officials manipulated tests of the 737 MAX, which may have contributed to 2 fatal crashes. The report found Boeing worked with the FAA to rig pilot testing to avoid raising awareness of a flaw in a key safety system. Testimonies from 50 whistleblowers were used to carry out the inquest. All the news, of course, on our website. There it is on your screen, aljazeera.com. Let's get a quick check on the headlines now here on Al Jazeera. US regulators have approved a second coronavirus vaccine for emergency use. The rollout of millions of doses of the Moderna vaccine is expected to begin this weekend. Tests show it's more than 94% effective when given in 2 doses 4 weeks apart. Our White House correspondent, Kimberly Halkett, has more.
We've heard a lot of talk about similarities between the Moderna vaccine and also the Pfizer vaccine. We know that they are going to be prescribed rather similarly. In other words, that it is for individuals 18 years of age and above. So what they're saying is that, again, with this Moderna vaccine, like the Pfizer vaccine, that there just isn't enough testing and data done on children and young adults or teenagers. So as a result, they are not encouraging it for those under the age of 18. And once again, like we found out with the Pfizer vaccine, those that have anaphylaxis or are susceptible to allergic reaction should not get this vaccine. That is also the case with Moderna.
Well, earlier, US Vice President Mike Pence was inoculated with the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine that was approved last week. President-elect Joe Biden will do the same on Monday. Politicians are getting their jabs in public to boost confidence in the vaccination process. The US Congress has managed to temporarily avoid a government shutdown. It's approved a 2-day extension of funding to keep agencies operating until Sunday. That's as Republicans and Democrats try to resolve sticking points on a $900 billion coronavirus relief package. Brazil's president has tried to cast doubt on coronavirus vaccines, making unfounded claims about their side effects. Earlier, the Supreme Court ruled that vaccination can be made compulsory, but Jair Bolsonaro has repeatedly said he won't be taking one. No vaccines have been approved for use in Brazil, despite a surge in infections and deaths. More than 300 students in Nigeria are being reunited with their families a week after they were kidnapped. 344 boys were kidnapped from their school last Friday by armed men on motorbikes. Details of their rescue are still not clear, including who was responsible and whether a ransom was paid. Well, those were the headlines. The news continues here on Al Jazeera after 101 East. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.
When an Ethiopian mother put her daughter up for adoption, she knew little of what was to come. With family bonds severed, a traumatized child torn between two worlds struggles to return home. In a profoundly human story, exposing deep flaws in Denmark's adoption system. Girl in Return, a witness documentary on Al Jazeera.
Singapore street food is world famous. Traditional stalls serve up a vast range of cheap and tasty dishes, a staple diet for the masses. But the COVID-19 pandemic is turning up the heat on the hawkers. They face a stark choice to innovate or admit defeat.
The pressure is on, it's both physically and mentally as well as financially.
101 East examines how COVID-19 is changing Singapore's hawker culture. Beneath the shimmering skyline of the city-state where I grew up, a humble trade fuels the workforce. Across the island, some 20,000 food stalls serve up delicious dishes. A melting pot of cuisines by the early Chinese and Indian migrants who mingled with the local Malays.
Yeah, hello sir. Di panyo? Makan? Yeah. Okay.
These dishes have become part of Singapore's cultural heritage.
有一个白鸡腿饭，吃的加干跟碱哈。Okay.
I know the scene well. Mum used to sell chicken rice, considered one of the country's national dishes. And like many Singaporeans, I love my hawker food.
You know, this is really the smell and taste of growing up. It's my comfort food. And it's very much a part of Singapore's hawker culture. I can't believe I get to eat it for work.
A lot of hard work goes into making these dishes, kept alive by recipes and businesses passed down the generations. At the Golden Mile Food Centre, tucked away in one of Singapore's oldest neighbourhoods, 56-year-old Alice Chu sells fish soup and porridge. Her family has been in the hawker trade for 3 generations.
Thank you.
Alice took over the business from her mum, Cheng Gyok Hyok, who's 80 years old and continues to help out. Madam Cheng moved from a roadside stall to this food centre 45 years ago. She worked tirelessly to raise 3 daughters. Alice is her youngest.
人口啊，无一工过啊，拢总家己做啦。我早个就洗碗、洗碗。
我从小就跟着我妈妈学啦，去看她切点菜呀，然后就头嘛，不会嘛，你就会切到手，啊，煮的时候不会啦，会烫到手，啊，很辛苦的。
Over the years, they've stayed true to traditional ways and built up a loyal customer base. But then along came the COVID-19 pandemic. In a nationwide fight to curb the coronavirus, most workplaces were shut down between April and June. Eateries could only serve takeaway food.
没有生意，都的力没有生意，我们的人的不用还，杂费不用还，还是不可以 cover 的啦。就是不止我们，我一个，每个都是一样，每个都会着急。
Hawker food is an integral part of Singaporean life. But half of the hawkers are more than 60 years old, and few young ones are joining the trade. I visit Alice and her mum on their day off. They don't expect their family to have a 4th generation of hawkers.
现在的年轻人真的是吃不了苦的啦，真的是很辛苦的一份工来的。
To make ends meet, Alice's stall is open more than 12 hours a day. She's on her feet the whole time.
哎呦，那个就 ，Oh my God 不可以讲了，就是整身痛。每个做手饭的就是会脚痛的。
那你的膝盖？
膝盖痛，我膝盖痛。doctor 说没有那个教治了，要去开刀。
你本身有没有兴趣说希望你的孩子接班？
很矛盾呐，叫他们来继续来做，他们是很辛苦。叫他们不要来做的话呢，他们就好像我们的那些传统的食物就会慢慢的消失了，很可惜。
Overheads are high, up to several thousand US$ a month. A typical meal costs about $3, and hawkers take home only 10 to 15% in profit. Alice needs to sell more than 1,000 servings a month just to break even.
我们小贩啊，要卖出那份食物哈，要物价廉美嘛。这份食物没有赚到这么多，那些年轻人的野心可能会比较大嘛，说麻辣糊摊。
Having seen how much hard work it takes, it wasn't something I wanted to do. But there is a young hawker who is confident of success.
I'm proud of my family fishball recipe.
Delanix Tan is just 22, but his family has been in the hawker business since his grandfather's time.
Handmade fishball we could actually have it's more pa. Pa means that actually have more air inside because we use our hand to squeeze it.
At the end of 2019, Delanix applied to join a government program to start a hawker stall. The following April, his dream came true when he opened a fishball noodle stall in the business district. He named it Santai Fishball. Santai means 3 generations in Chinese. His parents' stall in the market provided a ready supply of fresh fish balls.
Since young, I've been helping out my dad. I've always wanted to start my own business. So I was thinking instead of wasting time to go and learn other things, right, I was thinking I can just work on this business and then maybe expand it.
But just 4 days after opening his stall, growing fears over COVID-19 triggered Singapore's restrictions. Delanix was forced to suspend business.
I was panicking because my money was on the line, and I was very passionate about this.
He had no income for 2 months. When the restrictions began to ease, Delanix couldn't wait to relaunch. To advertise, he posted in a popular Facebook group, Hawkers United Tapao, which was created during the crisis for hawkers to promote their food online.
I was quite taken aback by the response because my post basically went viral, and then there's a lot of news media, social media platform that actually featured me. So I got a lot of support from local Singaporeans and stuff. Some even donated money. I think Singaporeans are very happy that there is someone young that is willing to join the trade.
His passion caught the imagination of Singaporeans. But will he succeed?
It's quite daunting for them. I've spoken to a lot of young hawkers. You see, what they fear is the older ones. Wow, they're going to eat me up.
KF Sito is a well-known champion of Singapore's hawker food. He says it's a tough industry to break into, even before the pandemic.
If you don't know the 360 game of being a professional hawker, you're just going to sit there and swat flies and watch your soup reduced to a sauce at the end of the day.
And this 360 game is important for luring customers.
Among a host of other things you should know as a brand new hawker. What must you sell? What must it look like? Do you understand the food culture it came from? Are you good on social media? How should you lay out your kitchen so that it's sexy when people walk by? Wow, hey. So all those little touches you've got to know.
Delanix did everything he could. But with the pandemic forcing many Singaporeans to work from home, hawker stalls in the city centre struggled.
Hi everyone, I'm Delanix. So today is basically the last day of Santai Fishball at Amoy Street.
In August, Delanix was forced to close his stall for good, just 2 months after he reopened.
Like many other hawkers at Amoy Street, we realised that the food is just so bad and it's not sustainable to keep throwing money into this black hole. And I just want to do this video to thank you guys, especially those who supported me.
Which one is your store?
So basically this was my store. Yeah.
And what about the rest around you? Were they affected as well?
Yeah, they are. I mean, today when I came in, I was shocked to see that this prawn noodle has really closed down, as well as the burger store over there.
And they were both affected by the...
Yes, deeply affected. For the store behind me, things are different because they have been doing this for very long. And their food is really good. I think the learning point is like, most important thing is building a customer base. I feel quite sad and like nostalgic about this thing. I've been wanting to do this for quite some time already. And I also feel kind of like embarrassed.
Passion is not enough, especially in street food.
It's becoming an all too familiar story for Sito. So how hopeful are you for the future of Singapore's hawker culture?
Right now, it looks kind of grey, man. If you just walk, you see a lot of stores are shuttering up. Not enough people are replacing the older hawkers that are going off. If things don't change, it will die. Maybe in 10 years' time, 15, 20 years' time, it will.
Desperate to keep their businesses alive, some hawkers are trying to adapt. With help from her daughter, Alice Chu began to embrace technology to sell her fish soup, using Facebook for online orders.
我女儿放一个 post 上去，然后就 send 给朋友啦，因为她是 Church Christian 嘛，她的 Christian friend 就 text 我 WhatsApp 我 order， 然后到有一天呢，有一个 customer 他帮我 post 上去那个 Hawker United 打包那边，所以我有更多的新的 customer。疫情之后呢，我们才发现到我们真的是需要这些科技来维持我们的生意。
Thanks to mobile phone apps, people working from home are just a few swipes away from ordering in their favorite food. But not all hawkers want to do business with them.
Hello man, good morning. Can I help?
Like 58-year-old Sulaiman Abu.
Because they charge us very high. 34%, 32%. It's too high for us. It's not right. We cannot mark our price. You cannot simply just increase in price. It has to be affordable to all.
A hawker for more than 40 years, Sulaiman runs a thriving stall selling nasi lemak. It's a traditional Malay dish, rice cooked with coconut milk and served with egg, fried anchovies, peanuts and chili paste.
One nasi lemak takeaway, please, thank you.
In 2013, Sulaiman was chosen as a master trainer to mentor new hawkers in a government program to preserve Singapore's food heritage.
To create this masterpiece, we need about 10 years to master. The hard thing is the preparation of the food. For me, it's no shortcut. Like how you prepare a chili, you must use a stone grinder.
For Sulaiman, the best way to future-proof his business is not technology, but to stay authentic to his parents' values. When you think of nasi lemak, who do you think about?
Think about parents. And the hard work they showed to us. And from there, we brought out, if you can deliver good food with a good price and with the same quality, people still come back to you. That's what been taught by our parents.
While established hawkers may still thrive on walk-in customers, home delivery has become a lifeline for others. And two young entrepreneurs have made it their mission to help.
1621，可以帮我再做一个1622的吗？
This is the char siu rice, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, correct.
Thank you.
Elroy Lim and Tai Zhang Kai call themselves the hawker heroes. Seeing how the pandemic affected stall owners, the two friends started a delivery service with a difference.
We are one of the few platforms that don't actually charge any commission or onboarding fees to the hawkers. So that's why they were really very skeptical.
Every single hawker that you see on our platform, I had a face-to-face conversation with them. Initially it was very tiring, but I guess a lot of them really suffering, so they took that chance with us.
The heroes take orders online for lunch on weekdays, featuring a different food center each day. Hawkers pay nothing for their services. Customers pay a flat delivery fee. All of it goes to the driver. Hawker heroes also charge customers 10% of the food bill for their services. But with just over 100 hawkers from 4 food centers on board, they're not even covering costs. How do you plan to make it sustainable?
Well, I always have trouble with this question. For us to sustain, I think it's really a demand and supply thing. As long as hawkers want, we are committed to be here. My motivation to start Hawker Heroes is really to help out the older hawkers. Uncle Auntie, 早安，谢谢今天的 order 哦，可以哦。对，谢谢你。
Today is a big day for the Hawker Heroes. They are expanding to their 5th food centre, bringing their services to Chinatown complex.
Finally, it's like a dream come true for us in Chinatown. Because Chinatown is quite legendary in Singapore, right? It's one of the largest hawker centres here. And we have been wanting to be able to help them for the longest time because of the sheer number of older hawkers.
Today, they are putting in extra effort before the collection time to remind hawkers of food orders sent the night before.
我是那个 Hawker Hero 的。我们有 order 今天有收到吗？
什么 order 啊？
你谢有没有跟你讲？星期五，今天今天。谁要吃？我。哦哈 ，OK。我未记你拜过呢。
Another hawker couldn't figure out how to load the order details on his smartphone.
I actually sent you last night already.
I saw order, detail.
Oh, there, I show you.
We hope that after maybe a couple of more times, as the hawkers get more used to using WhatsApp, checking the message, we can get this whole operation more smooth out. I've been here since I was young, ordering food from them, but right now I'm able to help get them through this tough time as well. It makes me feel very happy about that.
To save costs, Elroy helps with the delivery as well. But one thing continues to trouble him.
Not all food sits well being packed away because the sauce gets absorbed and whatnot. By the time all this food it reaches the customer, it becomes a bit lumpy, a bit dry, so it really doesn't do justice to the quality of food that the hawkers actually do deliver.
Today I'm meeting someone who is already trying to solve this problem. Chef Ming Tan runs a chain of restaurants. Business has suffered from the pandemic, and he hopes his invention will help it turn the corner.
Hawker fare is loved by everyone. Whether you're rich or poor, it's a common local thing.
Ming and his team spent 4 months researching how to cook Hokkien mee, a famous noodle dish that requires plenty of skill with a wok and fire control. He calls his version the damn easy Hokkien mee. It comes pre-packaged. Customers complete the final steps of the cooking at home in 10 minutes, straight out of the fridge, using just a pot on a stove. How do you think it measures up with a really good Hokkien mee from a hawker centre?
This is the first item that we brought to markets and we're happy with. We're going to carry on refining this. I think there's some aspects of flavour that I still can't replicate and put it down to the old masters and their skill.
At $18 for a pack that feeds 2 or 3 people, it's nearly 3 times more expensive than fresh Hokkien mee fried up by the old masters. But most Singaporeans expect hawker food to be cheap and are unwilling to pay more.
I think the mentality will have to shift. In terms of our price increase, there's definitely room. Maybe I should, be more willing to spend the extra, maybe 50 cents or $1 on their food items.
As Singapore weathers the worst recession in its 55-year history, Elroy and Zhang Kai have front row seats to how the pandemic is hurting the hawkers.
There was a period of time, I think, especially in the last 1 to 2 months, every Friday we had one vendor coming, messaging us, say, hey bro, thanks for the support, we'll be closing down. It's heartbreaking for us. I think Singaporeans have to see what it takes to be a hawker, the hard work behind, the long hours.
What they don't realize is that they are enjoying all this very low price food at the expense of the hawker.
How do you see the future of Singapore's hawker culture?
So if this doesn't change, we should see more and more of them closing down because of the price issues.
Pang Wing Hong and his wife, Chia Siu Hock, retired this year after a lifetime as hawkers. His knee can no longer withstand the hours of standing after 50 years in the trade. Cataracts hinder his vision. They had to sell their business for $15,000, less than half of what they wanted.
你会失望吗？没办法，因为脚痛，还个眼睛。有一个是要来顶的是，他价钱放比较高一点啊。我们2个商量之后，我说他完全
没有这个功夫啊，也没有煮过东西的人，应该不可以给他啦。
The noodle stall has been the main draw in this coffee shop since Mr. Pang's father started it in 1949. The new owner is a younger hawker. As part of the sale, he will retain the stall's facade and signboard, and Mr. Pang will impart his wealth of knowledge. Mr. Pang is teaching how to cook the dish that made him famous, Hokkien Mee. I know another person who might benefit from his mastery. I've arranged for Chef Ming to come today so that the Pangs can do a taste test of his pre-packaged Hokkien Mee.
师傅啊，希望你们能够接受我的福建面啊。 我今天煮给你们吃，我也是有点担心啊。
会啊，不会啊。
真的，我担心。我
觉得这个面是 OK， 味道可以。就是我现在是没有吃到3层肉，怪怪的。
啊，一片一片的。
啊，对对对。
但是你听我讲嘛，冰冻了3层肉，放个汤锅一片就好，放个汤
熬一下子。
所有在哪些啊？然后那3层肉不会没有问题。
它的比较好，原味好。 就是保持原状，就是好像新鲜的。
只不过这些虾有点贵了。
这个虾贵这么多，
太多了。
你可以改良，就是放3层肉，还有那个手工质量啊，就是调和它价钱就是对了啦。
A few more trade secrets later, it's time to ask the all-important question.
明，你讲一下你10分给自己打几分？
哇，我自己给差不多7分吧。
你们给他10分打几分？
我给他7分半。
哇，谢谢。
OK 啦，我是跟他一样7分。
不要成功哦！
不要成功，他已经差不多成功了。
This is such a heartwarming experience, you know, speaking to these two masters of Hokkien noodles. I'm very humbled at the fact that I'm learning so much just from one conversation with them. I am determined to turn that 7 out of 10 into an 8 or 9 out of 10.
With the pandemic far from over, most hawkers can't afford another crisis. Just as Alice Chu's fish soup business is beginning to improve, the food center where she works is about to close for 3 months for renovation.
没有办法啦，不用吃了吗？新加坡人哪里可以3个月不用做工的？
只要你做工来，
做工咯，做工做咯，我做晒都唔係做嚟笑。好，我熱水換嘅乜依單愛叫我做 supervisor 咧。
葉頭
嘅呢單啊，我嚟做工啦，做工嚟做啦。呢個就冇人嗌啊。
我来那个小碗就无人爱，教人我那个小碗。
真系卡疼了，小碗。
下摆 at least 伊无做了吼，还是伊拖无人接手，你会家己安怎袂？
我就去了无，80岁了嘛啦。老了嘛啦，有淡个想长嘅代志，无了啦，免想了咯。
好好过日子就对了啦。啊，对。
嘿，伊咱好啊，你我去食糜，开就好了啦，对不对？
For young Delenix Tan, it's not quite the end of the road yet for his hawker journey. On weekends, he still helps his family at their stall in a neighborhood market. The signboard from his fishball noodle adventure hangs right here.
Can just bring it over so people can know that this brand is still alive. If in the future there's an opportunity in the market that is near my dad, this right, I might consider reopen again because I already know the fundamentals.
The proximity will help him save on the cost of transporting supplies from his dad's stall. But his decision also hinges on the cost of labor. Singapore doesn't allow low-wage foreign workers to be hired as stall assistants. Delenix hopes that will change.
The major concern for me is manpower issue. Most of our workers here is all family members and they're already aging already. It will really help with the workload and I think that will actually can attract more people to enjoy the trade.
And to help them thrive in the trade, Sito has long insisted that young hawkers need formal training.
We really need to set up a hawker culinary institution, a hawker food institution, not just teaches people about how to cook and how to set up a stall, but the full gamut of being a street food professional worldwide. I think there are no heroes in our hawker food culture. We don't have like a Gordon Ramsay or maybe a Bourdain or somebody of hawker culture that people want to admit, oh wow, I can be that.
What's the problem?
Disdain. They like it but they want to be in it. Singaporeans think hawkers are there to provide them a service cheaply and affordably. Okay? They feel that, oh, it's a culture I can blog about. But to ask them to go and cook and do this, no. I got money, I don't want to be a hawker.
Maybe that's why my parents never wanted me to be a hawker, and neither did I aspire to be one. Today, chicken rice brings back fond memories of growing up, but it's never quite as good as how Mum cooked it. I'm biased, of course. But the pandemic has unmasked some hard truths. Until hawkers become heroes, no amount of tech innovation will keep our street food culture alive.
Stories of abuse in aged care homes in the West have shocked the world. But there's an alternative. 101 East meets those sending elderly loved ones to Thailand to live out their days on Aljazeera.
From fossil fuels to modern-day renewables, as societies develop, their energy demands increase, requiring innovative solutions to meet such demands. As a global power development and investment company, Nabras Power is uniquely positioned to deliver against these demands. We provide business growth, promote socio-economic benefits and provide innovative, safe and environmentally sound energy solutions for future generations. Nabras Power, pioneering future energy.
US regulators approved the Moderna vaccine for emergency use, the second within a week, but the pandemic is far from being contained. Hello, I'm Darren Jordan. This is Al Jazeera, live from Doha. Also coming up, Brazil's Supreme Court rules taking the vaccine can be made compulsory, but that's at odds with the president's defiant stance on immunization. A former governor in Mexico's Jalisco state becomes the latest victim of drug-related violence that's spiraling out of control. And hungry and traumatized, more than 300 children kidnapped in Nigeria are free after spending 6 days in captivity. US regulators have approved a second coronavirus vaccine and mass inoculations expected to start within days. Tests show the Moderna jab is more than 94% effective when administered in 2 doses 4 weeks apart. Its approval came just hours after the vice president was given the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine live on television in a bid to build support for the rollout. Alan Fisher begins our coverage from the White House.
Right. This was a very public vote of confidence in the coronavirus vaccine. The Vice President, his wife and the US Surgeon General getting an injection live on TV. They want to assure Americans that the vaccine works and it's safe.
The American people deserve to know that we've never been more prepared to combat the coronavirus than we are today. And even while we see cases rising and hospitalizations rising and heartbreaking losses, we'll continue to marshal the resources that we have secured as a nation, including a safe and effective vaccine, to meet this moment.
Senior members of the White House coronavirus team were also at the event, the most recognizable, Dr. Anthony Fauci, insisting the vaccine's finally providing a light at the end of what's been a very long tunnel.
As we get into January, February, March and April, that light is going to get brighter and brighter. and the bitterness is going to be replaced by the sweetness. And we all hope, and I think this is doable, that by the time we get to several months into this year, we will have enough people protected that we can start thinking seriously about the return to normality.
Not at the event in the old Executive Office building, right next door to the White House itself. The President. Instead, he was tweeting out allegations without proof that the presidential election had been stolen from him. His spokesperson says he's open to getting the vaccine. There are just no plans to do that at the moment. For the second Friday in a row, regulators in the US approved a vaccine, the Food and Drug Administration giving emergency use authorization to Moderna. That'll mean 6 million doses being sent out in the coming days. And because the drug doesn't have to be stored at extreme low temperatures, it can be used in more locations, more than 3,000 initially. But while the vaccines provide some good news, the scale of the problem in the US is actually growing. More than 3,000 deaths a day in recent days, hospitalizations at record numbers, health providers across all 50 states warning they're close to breaking point. And with families planning to gather in a week for the Christmas holiday, experts are worried that'll create another deadly spike that will cast a shadow into the new year. Alan Fisher, Al Jazeera, at the White House.
Well, US President-elect Joe Biden has welcomed the development, saying the authorization of 2 vaccines, Pfizer, BioNTech and now Moderna, assures American people that brighter days lie ahead. He said he believes 100 million vaccine shots can be given within the first 100 days of his administration, and that a coronavirus and economic relief package is needed immediately. Our White House correspondent Kimberly Halkett has more.
We know based on the Pfizer vaccine that was approved a week ago that it is healthcare workers who are on the front line of fighting this pandemic, as well as those that have been most impacted by the deaths, the elderly in the United States, particularly residents in care homes. But we're going to get a better sense of the distribution on Saturday. We know the Pentagon that is coordinating much of this is going to be holding a briefing along with the Health and Human Services Agency to discuss the distribution in more detail. But what we're expecting is that the first doses, which are already on standby, will be rolling out on Monday and soon after be delivered to the states where they can be injected into those that need it most. Now, in the midst of all of this, we've had reaction from the U.S. President Donald Trump. He has tweeted that the Moderna vaccine is now available. Congratulations. President-elect Joe Biden releasing a statement in the last few moments as well, saying that this is another milestone in overcoming this global pandemic. He assures that brighter days are ahead with not 1 but 2 vaccines now available to millions of Americans. But at the same time, he says that there are still challenges ahead. He is going to be inaugurated January 20th when he will be inheriting all of this. And he promises that in his first 100 days, that in fact there will be 100 million vaccines given to Americans that need it.
Wafa El Sadr is a professor of epidemiology and medicine at Columbia University. She says the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are very similar.
There are very few differences between these two vaccines. I think there are more similarities certainly than differences. They work equally well, and they also have a very similar safety profile. They both require 2 doses to be vaccinated. I think some subtle differences, like for example, the Pfizer vaccine, the second dose is given about 3 weeks after the first dose, while the Moderna vaccine, the second dose is given after 4 weeks. And another difference is that the Moderna vaccine does not require the level of freezing or the cold temperature that as much as the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine does. So it will make it a bit easier to distribute the Moderna vaccine than the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine. Yeah, Moderna is a much smaller company. It's a new company and is not like a well-established pharmaceutical company like Pfizer. But on the other hand, Moderna will benefit from distribution that will be done through support from the U.S. government. The Operation Warp Speed, which is the operation that's shepherded the development of these vaccines, will be responsible for the distribution of the Moderna vaccine in the United States.
The World Health Organization has warned that the next 3 to 6 months will be tough during the wait for coronavirus vaccines to help reduce transmission. Its Health Emergencies Director says countries with a high number of cases should still expect their infection rates to rise, particularly in the Americas.
Over 3/4 of the cases, we're seeing globally now are occurring in the Americas. It's a very, very high and intense period there, and it really does come back to being able to implement all of the measures that are needed, having strong coordination and governance, having a do-it-all approach in terms of both public health and social measures, advice to people on wearing masks and personal hygiene, and having a very strong focus on surveillance and testing.
Well, Dr. George C. Benjamin is the Executive Director of the American Public Health Association. He says the addition of a second vaccine is a significant boost to the fight against the pandemic.
The biggest difference is the fact that you don't have to keep it as cold. So that means we can get it into rural communities and to inner city communities and places where they just have a regular refrigerator versus the ultra cold storage that's required for the Pfizer vaccine. So it'll allow us to vaccinate more people. Well, Pfizer is certainly a giant in the pharmaceutical area, and particularly with vaccines. But Moderna has had support from the federal government and funding. But it always remains to be seen because production is a big deal. But we're confident that Moderna can do it. They've, they were very much first out of the box in terms of trying to get this vaccine in place. So hopefully they'll be able to produce all the vaccine that we requested. Well, I think we're going to have a steady increase in vaccine, and that will be accompanied with reductions in morbidity, people getting sick, and people dying. I think over time our society will be able to return to normal, and we're looking forward to having a very robust summer here in the United States. So I'm optimistic that we'll be able to get back to normal by this summer.
Meanwhile, Brazil's president has tried to cast doubt on coronavirus vaccines, making unfounded claims about their side effects. Earlier, the Supreme Court ruled that vaccination can be made compulsory, but Jair Bolsonaro has repeatedly said he won't be taking one. No vaccines have been approved for use in Brazil, despite a surge in infections and deaths.
Na Pfizer, está bem claro lá no contrato.
It's clear in the contract with Pfizer, we are not responsible for any side effects. If you become an alligator, that's your problem. I'm not going to mention another animal because you'll think I'm talking nonsense, right? If you become a Superman, if any woman grows a beard, or any man starts singing soprano, then they have nothing to do with it.
In Europe, the second wave of COVID-19 shows no sign of slowing. Italy is being placed under a nationwide lockdown over both Christmas and New Year, with bars, restaurants and non-essential shops closing. Austria's government is imposing a third lockdown, while in Germany, temporary freezers are being used to store bodies after a spike in coronavirus deaths overwhelmed hospitals. Rory Challams reports.
In the German city of Hanau, they've run out of space for bodies in the hospital morgues. A cooled shipping container is being used to temporarily handle the overflow.
Unfortunately, the situation in Hanau has changed. We now need to make use of our containers that we have had here since April, initially as a precaution. Since yesterday, 2 COVID-19 deceased are here. In total, 25 deceased can be stored in the container, and sadly, we had to start using the container from yesterday.
With a record of nearly 34,000 new cases and 813 new deaths, Germany has lost its position as a role model for how to handle the pandemic well, though vaccinations are set to start after Christmas.
The imminent probable approval of the first vaccine naturally gives us hope, but obviously it won't solve the problem. And realistically, we need to be prepared that the months of January and February will be the hardest months of this pandemic.
Several European countries are deep in the grip of a second or perhaps even third wave of coronavirus. French President Emmanuel Macron continues his isolation after catching it.
Continuez vraiment à faire attention.
Continue to be careful. On Thursday, I tested positive, which shows that the virus can really affect anyone because I am very protected. I am very careful, I respect distancing, I wear a mask, I regularly use hand sanitizer, and in spite of everything, I caught the virus. Surely due to a moment of inattention or a bit of bad luck, but that's the way it is.
Senior French government scientific advisor says vaccine rollout could take longer than thought. Don't expect a return to normal before late next year, Jean-François Delfraissy has warned. With more than 15,000 people in the UK currently hospitalised for coronavirus, the country is approaching the first wave peak of 18,000 hospitalisations. In any normal year, central London would be teeming with Christmas shoppers. But this, as we know, is no normal year. Londoners are among the 38 million people across the United Kingdom currently living under the toughest of the 3 coronavirus restriction tiers. Yes, there's a temporary relaxation for Christmas itself, so families can get together. But in many parts of the country, after that, the shutters are coming down again, and they're coming down harder. The cheer generated by being the first country to administer the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine has worn off already. Stopping the National Health Service becoming overwhelmed has again become a top priority. Rory Challens, Al Jazeera, London.
Time for a short break here in Al Jazeera. When we come back, we look at why Venezuela's president has dissolved his constituent assembly without it changing a word of the constitution. More on that. Stay with us.
Hello, the weather looks slightly quiet across much of the Middle East. We've got some bits and pieces of cloud across northern parts of the region, just around the Levant, pushing across into Syria, Lebanon, Jordan. Some showers a possibility into Iran, pushing across towards Afghanistan. Might even see a spot or two of light rain here in Qatar, but nothing much to speak of. The winds will pick up here as we go on through Sunday, so more of a shamal setting in, a little bit of lifted dust and sand to watch out for. Could also watch out for some showers just around the southern end of the Red Sea. 1 or 2 of those showers maybe feeding their way in across the Horn of Africa, into Djibouti, into Eritrea. Could see a shower or 2 in Ethiopia, but the wetter weather will be just around the Rift Valley. We've got some more big downpours coming through here into the heart of Africa, pretty much where they should be, truth be told. They extend all the way across into the Gulf of Guinea, and you can follow this line of cloud out of the Democratic Republic of Congo, right down across Zambia, into Botswana and the northeast of South Africa. Some heavy showers coming through here, and if anything, that's just going to topple its way a little further westwards as we go through the next day or so. So turning increasingly wet across Angola, possibility of flooding into Namibia, but not too bad for that western side of South Africa.
A decade has passed since the Arab Spring swept through countries across the Middle East and North Africa. In a series of interviews, we explored the legacy of a revolution that changed the political landscape of the region. Tunisia's former president, Monsef Marzouki, discusses the Arab Spring 10 years on.
If you want to help save the world, sneeze into your elbow.
Welcome back. A quick reminder of our top stories here this hour. US regulators have approved a second coronavirus vaccine for emergency use. The rollout of millions of doses of the Moderna vaccine is expected to begin this weekend. Tests show it's more than 94% effective when given in 2 doses 4 weeks apart. Well, the news came just hours after US Vice President Mike Pence was inoculated with the Pfizer vaccine that was approved last week. President-elect Joe Biden will do the same on Monday. Politicians are getting their jabs in public to boost confidence in the vaccination process. And temporary freezers are being used to store bodies in a German city after a spike in coronavirus deaths overwhelmed hospitals. In Europe, the second wave of COVID-19 shows no sign of slowing, with the number of deaths exceeding 500,000. The number of coronavirus cases in India has now passed 10 million. That's according to official data released by government agencies in the last hour. India has the second highest number of cases in the world behind the US, although infection rates have sharply fallen in recent weeks. Elizabeth Paranam has more now from New Delhi.
India has surpassed 10 million recorded coronavirus cases, with the Supreme Court saying the COVID-19 pandemic spread like wildfire in the country because of a lack of implementation of guidelines to stop it. It's asking for better cooperation between the central and state governments. It's also asking the central government to find a way to give more time off to frontline healthcare workers who it said are exhausted physically and mentally from 8 months of tireless work. The good news is that the number of daily cases, the daily rise in cases, is the lowest it's been since mid-July. That's despite the fact India is testing more people now than it was then, but health experts say it's still not testing as many as it should be. Meanwhile, the Indian government is busy planning the first phase of vaccinations, which are expected to begin in January. Pfizer, Serum Institute of India, which is the world's largest vaccine maker and is testing and manufacturing the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, and another Indian company called Bharat Biotech have all applied for emergency authorization. And the Indian government has said that it could soon start voluntary inoculations as it considers emergency use. It's planning to vaccinate around 300 million people in the first phase, which it expects will last the first half of 2021.
The World Health Organization's vaccine initiative says it secured nearly 2 billion doses of vaccines for people in low and middle-income countries. The COVAX Alliance is aiming to deliver approved vaccines to 190 countries during the first half of next year. It's now doubled its supply after signing deals with Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca. The US Congress has managed to temporarily avoid a government shutdown. It's approved a 2-day extension of funding to keep agencies operating until Sunday. That's as Republicans and Democrats try to resolve sticking points in a $900 billion coronavirus relief package. They're hoping to approve it over the weekend after months of stalemate. The fiancé of Jamal Khashoggi has called on US President-elect Joe Biden to release the CIA's classified report into the journalist's murder once he takes office. Atisha Cengiz says the move would greatly assist in finding out the truth. There are reports the investigation concluded with medium to high confidence that Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman ordered the killing. Khashoggi was murdered inside Saudi Arabia's consulate in Istanbul in 2018. A week after they were kidnapped from a school in Nigeria, more than 300 boys are now being reunited with their families. Parents in the northern state of Katsina celebrated as they saw their sons for the first time since they were taken. 344 boys were kidnapped from their school last Friday by armed men on motorbikes. Details of their rescue are still not clear, including who was responsible and whether a ransom was paid. Some of the boys say they were beaten daily by their captors.
To be honest, there was no food or water for us, no shelter, no break. And the Friday we were taken, we spent 2 days without sleep. Our food was leaves, and after 2 days without food, we were given fresh potatoes and pieces of groundnut cake.
Frankly speaking, I feel like God has granted me paradise because I'm so happy. After spending 2 days without eating anything, my mother is more than 90 years old and I am her last born, and she too stopped eating and drinking. In addition, my 3 sisters were admitted to hospital.
From Katsina, Aljazeera's Ahmed Idris reports.
Walking barefoot, some of them limping, the 344 schoolboys are led by Nigerian security forces to the safe environment of the governor's office in Katsina after nearly a week in captivity. Instead of joy, it's fear and exhaustion written on their young faces.
You suffered physically, mentally, psychologically. But let me assure you that we have suffered more. Your parents have suffered more.
The government says all the students abducted in an armed raid on a boarding school in the town of Kankara last week have now been freed. But it's yet to explain the circumstances leading to their release.
A quick intervention prevented Nigeria's largest mass abduction from turning into another Chibok disaster. In 2014, security experts say Nigeria's authorities failed to act quickly when Boko Haram took more than 270 students from a girls' secondary school in Chibok. More than 100 of them are still unaccounted for.
For 6 days, the students were forced to trek and hike until Nigerian security forces pinned down their abductors in a forest in nearby Zamfara state. Earlier, hundreds more students either escaped on their own or were helped by the military, and many in a poor state of health. 14-year-old Osama Aminu managed to make his own way to freedom, but the punishing trek across forests and rocky hills has left him now fighting for his life. He is bedridden because of sickle cell anemia, made worse by this experience. His father is desperately worried about his health.
He said he was propped up and helped along by fellow students as they marched through a thick forest. When their group was rested for a few minutes, he saw a chance to escape. He crawled away and hid behind a tree. Later, he dragged himself to a village where he was brought home on a motorcycle.
Kankara Secondary School, from where the boys were taken, is now shut, just like schools in 3 other states in Nigeria's northwest. The authorities are taking no chances there could be further such raids. Nigeria's security forces are overstretched. They are fighting many battles, including against the armed group Boko Haram, who are against Western-style education. But eventually, the government will want the schools to reopen. Ahmed Idris, Aljazeera, Katsina, Nigeria.
Ethiopia's government is offering a reward for information that could help locate leaders of the Tigray region's ruling party. The military is putting up a cash pot of $260,000. The region's leaders went into hiding when federal troops captured the local capital, Mekelle, nearly 2 weeks ago. Meanwhile, Ethiopia has summoned the Sudanese ambassador in Addis Ababa to protest what it described as trespassing and raids on its territory. A former governor of the Mexican state of Jalisco was shot dead early on Friday in the beach town of Puerto Vallarta. It's the latest in a series of violent acts in a country already plagued by drug-related gang activity. Aljazeera's John Holman has more.
This video apparently records the moment when the ex-governor of the Mexican state of Jalisco was killed in a restaurant. Aristoteles Sandoval was holidaying in the resort town of Puerto Vallarta. He was out with 3 other people and a 15-strong bodyguard team provided by the state who couldn't save him.
The attack happened at 1:40 in the morning. The ex-governor got up from the table and went to the bathroom. That's where an armed man shot him in the back.
Killings have become common at local level in Mexican politics, but the murder of an ex-governor is still very unusual. The investigation into who was behind the attack is just beginning, but it's not going to be easy. That's because, the state attorney said, the staff from the restaurant cleaned up the crime scene, took away evidence and even removed security cameras. Jalisco State in the southwest of the country is the heartland of one of Mexico's most powerful criminal groups, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. This is one of the videos they've released showing their firepower, and they've not been afraid to turn it on authorities before. This assassination could mark the start of a real season of political violence in Mexico, and that's because next July the country's holding its biggest ever elections. And in the run-up to elections in the country is usually the point where criminal groups try to position their own candidates, and they often do that by murdering rival ones. Aristoteles Sandoval, former governor of Jalisco, will likely not be the last to die. John Holman, Al Jazeera, Mexico City.
Venezuela's controversial Constituent Assembly is being dissolved. It was supposedly created to rewrite the constitution, but was in fact used as a legislative superbody that could bypass the opposition-held parliament. Our Latin America editor, Lucia Newman, reports.
3.5 years ago, amid persistent opposition protests, Venezuela's embattled President Nicolás Maduro announced he was unilaterally calling for a constituent assembly to rewrite the constitution written by his predecessor, deceased President Hugo Chávez.
I summon the native constituent power to achieve the peace that the Republic needs to overthrow the fascist coup, and so that the people, with their sovereignty, will be able to impose peace, harmony, and a true national dialogue.
Even appeals from the Pope couldn't stop him from forming a 500-member body with superpowers above all other institutions. Critics were quick to predict that its real aim was to annihilate the opposition-controlled parliament and consolidate a dictatorship. Indeed, the Assembly's most notable achievement was to strip more than 30 opposition deputies of their parliamentary immunity so that they could be arrested and tried for allegedly inciting violence or treason.
It's fairly brazen. It's clear now that, as it was indeed, of course, from the beginning, but it's even clearer now, that the intention was merely to provide a kind of rubber stamp parliament for the Maduro government so that it could pass, ostensibly at least, pass laws, many of which have been extremely repressive.
Do you know of any other country in the world where something like this has happened?
Certainly, I would imagine it has to be the only instance of a constituent assembly, rather, that has not even debated a single article of a proposed new constitution.
Now that the ruling Socialist Party will take total control of the legislature on January 5th after highly contested elections, the Constituent Assembly is being dissolved just as quickly as it was created.
We're handing over a country in peace, in peace, in peace, with a newly elected legislature with diverse representation that will assume the challenge of maintaining constitutionality.
Cabello says they've done their duty without having changed a comma of the original constitution. Not, say critics, that that was ever the point. Lucia Newman, Al Jazeera.
Prosecutors in the United States are urging a federal judge to reject a nearly $30 million bail deal for Ghislaine Maxwell. The former associate of Jeffrey Epstein has pleaded not guilty to charges of helping him recruit and groom underage girls to engage in illegal sexual acts. Prosecutors say Maxwell should remain behind bars because the evidence against her is strong and she poses an extreme flight risk. A US congressional report has found that Boeing officials manipulated tests of the 737 MAX, which may have contributed to 2 fatal crashes. The report found Boeing worked with the FAA to rig pilot testing to avoid raising awareness of a flaw in a key safety system. Testimonies from 50 whistleblowers was used to carry out the inquest, which also found the FAA retaliated against people reporting issues. Another stadium in Qatar set to host matches during the 2022 Football World Cup has held its first game. The Al Rayyan Stadium staged the Emir Cup final exactly 2 years before the World Cup final will be kicking off. The venue will host 7 matches in 2022. The stadium has a capacity of 40,000, but numbers are limited due to coronavirus. Time for a quick check of the headlines here on Al Jazeera. US regulators have approved a second coronavirus vaccine for use. The rollout of millions of doses of the Moderna vaccine is expected to begin this weekend. Tests show it's more than 94% effective when given in 2 doses 4 weeks apart. Our White House correspondent Kimberly Halkett has more.
We've heard a lot of talk about similarities between the Moderna vaccine and also the Pfizer vaccine. We know that they are going to be prescribed rather similarly. In other words, that it is for individuals 18 years of age and above. So what they're saying is that, again, with this Moderna vaccine, like the Pfizer vaccine, that there just isn't enough testing and data done on children and young adults or teenagers. So as a result, they are not encouraging it for those under the age of 18. And once again, like we found out with the Pfizer vaccine, those that have anaphylaxis or are susceptible to allergic reaction should not get this vaccine. That is also the case with Moderna.
Well, earlier, US Vice President Mike Pence was inoculated with the Pfizer vaccine that was approved last week. President-elect Joe Biden will do the same on Monday. Politicians are getting their jabs in public to boost confidence in the vaccination process. The US Congress has managed to temporarily avoid a government shutdown. It's approved a 2-day extension of funding to keep agencies operating until Sunday. That's as Republicans and Democrats try to resolve sticking points on a $900 billion coronavirus relief package. The number of coronavirus cases in India has now passed 10 million. It remains the second worst affected country in the world behind the US, although infection rates have sharply fallen in recent weeks. On Friday, India's Supreme Court said COVID-19 had spread like wildfire because guidelines were not properly implemented. More than 300 students in Nigeria are being reunited with their families a week after they were kidnapped. Parents in the northern state of Katsina rejoiced as they saw their sons for the first time since they were taken. Details of their rescue are still not clear, including who was responsible and whether a ransom was paid. Well, the news continues here on Al Jazeera after the Arab Spring 10 years on. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.
Stay calm and make sure you're not hyping the situation.
Be part of the debate.
My main characters are women.
When no topic is off the table.
The laws in the U.S. allow child marriage to happen legally.
These are basically archaic laws that often legitimize and legalize pedophilia.
On air or online.
Jump into the comment section and you too can be part of the discussion.
The Stream on Al Jazeera.
It's been 10 years since a young fruit seller in Tunisia set himself on fire in protest against police who beat him and seized his cart and produce. Mohamed Bouazizi died 18 days later, triggering outrage. Hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets to challenge the regime of Zain al-Abidin bin Ali. After 24 years of authoritarian rule, bin Ali fled the country on January 14, 2011. Saudi Arabia granted him refuge. Tunisia was left in turmoil. Eventually, protests spread beyond its borders. People in different countries across North Africa and the Middle East demanded regime change too. The movement became known the world over as the Arab Spring. In Tunisia, power automatically fell into the hands of bin Ali's Prime Minister, Mohamed Ghannouchi. But a day later, on January the 15th, the Constitutional Council determined the then Speaker of Parliament, Fouad Mbazza, was the rightful acting president. He remained in office until Monsef al-Marzouqi was elected president by the Constituent Assembly in December. Marzouqi, an opposition leader who'd spent 2 decades in exile in Paris, remained in power for 3 years. So, what legacy did the uprising leave in Tunisia and the region? We'll find out more as we talk to the former Tunisian president, Monsef Marzouqi, about the Arab Spring 10 years on. Your Excellency, former President of Tunisia, Monsef Marzouqi, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us. I want to start by asking you, 10 years now have passed since those historic events that not only erupted in Tunisia, but essentially had reverberations around the whole Arab world that captured the interest and the attention of the entire globe, in fact. Looking back at those 10 years, how do you assess them?
Well, first of all, thank you for this invitation. Yes, when I look back to this past decade, to try to understand what happened to Tunisia, what happened to the Arab world, what happened to me, I would say that I'm struck by 2 main ideas. The first is that, in fact, our revolution, the Arab revolution, they are normal revolutions because they follow what I call the 5 laws of revolutions. The first law is that every revolution has a human cost, a high human cost. Fortunately, here in Tunisia, we didn't pay that very much. The cost was not that high, but when I consider what happened in countries like Yemen, like Syria, like Libya, it's really awful. It's something terrible. The second law is that every revolution is followed by a counter-revolution. That's normal. That's what happened everywhere. And this is what happened in our countries. The third law is that revolutions don't profit to the people who were behind the revolution. And unfortunately, this is what happened here in Tunisia. A lot of people died, a lot of people were injured, but they didn't profit at all from the revolution. Other people profit from this revolution. And the fourth law would be a revolution is like a cat, eating her offspring. The front against dictatorship here in Tunisia broke out, and now the the good guys were fighting together side by side, now are rivals and sometimes enemies. And the most important law is that it takes a long time, to achieve some of the objectives. Now, 10 years after the start of the revolution, unfortunately, we didn't achieve all our objectives, but this is quite normal. And the second idea is that our revolutions are paradoxical revolutions. The first paradox is that from the beginning, the very start, they were peaceful revolution, but they led to terrible civil wars in Libya, Syria, and Yemen. From the very start, they were secular revolutions, but they gave power to the Islamists. And the third paradox is that they were local revolutions, local phenomena, but they have led very, very soon, very quickly to be battlegrounds for foreign powers. So those characteristics, specific and general characteristics, you can understand what happened to this part of the world, and you can foresee also.
As somebody who, prior to the revolution, was known for their stance in terms of pushing for greater human rights, for greater civil liberties in Tunisia, and then who went on to use that principle to elevate yourself essentially as the first interim or the first president to be chosen by the people. How do you view those initial gains? Because, as people, and I was a reporter covering the protests across the Arab world in 2011, there was such a high at the time amongst the people. You could almost feel it. You could almost hold it that there was a new beginning. 10 years on, do you, when that optimism is no longer there, do you view that it is dead, or as you're analyzing it now, that this is just some sort of a phase as the Arab world continues to change?
If we consider the situation in Tunisia, I am proud of the numerous achievements that we have realized during those 10 years. First of all, we are now a free nation. We have free elections. We have a free parliament. We have freedom of expression. We have freedom of gathering, etc., etc. And I can assure you that as a human rights activist, I was very extremely cautious about torture. I said from the beginning to the police and the army that I will never accept any kind of torture, and torture has stopped in Tunisia. Now you don't have torture in Tunisia, and this is very important. So I can also, we have one of the best constitutions in the Arab world, even in the world, not only by what's inside this constitution, but because of the making of this constitution. We have had more than 400 gathering meetings, 3 years of discussion, and the constitution was adopted by the people themselves. This was the first experience in the Arab world. So I can say that from the political point of view, we have achieved a lot. Of course, we didn't realize a perfect democracy. We still have fragile democracy. We still have even a corrupt democracy, but we have a democracy, and this is very important in the Arab world.
Sorry to interrupt here. I want to ask you, those are very important gains that you mentioned, but those gains were also, by the way, achieved in Egypt, for example. They made their own constitution, they had free elections, and they had an administration which was very vocal against torture. However, because of the counter-revolution, because of the lack of justice that was exerted on the former despots and those who governed Egypt, those gains, as you mentioned, as you described them very importantly, those fragile gains, they were overturned almost, by night. Are you not worried that Tunisia, with all the foreign interference that is happening in it, and we'll go into that shortly after, are you not worried that those gains that you talk about could disappear also, very quickly?
Absolutely, I agree totally with you. This is why I said we have democracy, but very fragile democracy. And now, at this very moment, people are here in Tunisia are talking about coup. They are asking the military to intervene because we have a lot of economic problems, etc. I am very aware of this fragile situation, but I am also confident that here in Tunisia we have a lot of people who will defend the constitution. We will never accept a scenario like in Egypt. It's quite sure that we didn't achieve our social and economic objective, and this is the main problem. This is where we think that we have failed because the revolution, the roots of the revolution were poverty and unemployment among educated youth. And those kind of problems, we didn't solve them. Not only because the counter-revolution, but also because the situation, the economic situation in our country, in the world, etc. So what I'm afraid of is that because of the economic situation, the counter-revolution would take pretext of this situation, to say, hey, freedom of expression is very important, but it's very important for the elite. But for the people, what is the most important thing is to have jobs, and we are going to give the jobs, etc. And then, really, here in Tunisia, we are at risk of a coup like in Egypt. But once again, we have to battle for freedom. It's not, the game is not over. The game is very difficult, but the process is still going. And I do think that here in Tunisia, at least we can achieve our objective. Not very soon, but I do hope that in a few years to come, we will achieve not only the political objective, but also the social and economic objectives.
On the social and economic objective, obviously, one of the triggers, or the main trigger that came that ignited essentially the fire that was the protests in Tunisia was the death of Bouazizi, a merchant or a street vendor who set himself on fire out of desperation. Now, some people would have seen that act as coming from the economic desperation of people who weren't able to provide. Some will see it as an act of desperation because there was no freedom, the way he was reportedly humiliated by the authorities. There are many understandings, but one thing that is for certain, as you mentioned there, is that the economic situation in Tunisia remains one that is not very prosperous. Unemployment remains an issue. You have a young population. The productivity isn't so well. Add to that, one of the strengths of Tunisian society was its trade unions. However, we've seen over the past few years the trade unions being used, according to some people, by the counter-revolution to stop economic progress. Now, when we look at all the other economic support that some countries have had regionally, and you compare it to the economic support that Tunisia has had, you'll see that there is a big difference. So there's been billions of dollars that have been given to, for example, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi after he succeeded in the coup in Egypt. Why do you feel that there are, and you mentioned this, why do you feel that economically the counter-revolution, or rather the counter-revolution is using the economy to essentially thwart Tunisia's march towards fully fledged democracy?
Well, you are right. I think, of course, the main problem, as we have repeated many times, is the social and economic problem. But part of the problem comes from us, because we didn't succeed up to now to have political stability. In 10 years here in Tunisia, we have had 8 governments. Eight governments. For one government can last just sometimes less than 1 year. So when you have this kind of political instability, you cannot build up a political economic system, because everybody would say, let's wait for the next government before investing money and so forth. So this is our problem. We have to deal with our problem. We have to have this political stability. And the second, and you are also right when you talked about the support of Western government to Sisi and not to Tunisia. And this is really heartbreaking. This was my first disillusion about the Western government, because I saw from the beginning, when I was at the head of the state, that they were not keen, they were not interested in promoting democracy in Tunisia, contrary to what they have done in Eastern Europe. It was quite clear for me that they didn't see our revolution as the triumph of democracy, but they saw this revolution as the triumph of Islamism. And this was not true, because it was really the triumph of democracy. And even the Islamists, they were part of this democratic process. But the Western government didn't say, no, they are Islamists. They are. We have to throw them away.
But you are head of states, and you are head of states, and you are not an Islamist.
No, but the fact that there were Islamists in the government and that the Nahda was the first party, this was unacceptable for for the Western mind. For the Western mind, you cannot be an Islamist, you cannot be a Democrat if you are Islamist. And this is not true, because I tried to explain to many foreign leaders, to François Hollande and to Angela Merkel, look, you have in your country Christian Democrats. So why can't we have also in the Arab world some Islamists who are becoming Democrats? We Democrats, we didn't become Islamists, but the fact that Islamists became Democrats, so we have to accept them, and they want to be part of the game. So why do we reject them? But for the French, mainly for the French people, the French mind, they cannot accept that you can be an Islamist and a Democrat. I do believe that we have to take them on board, because if you leave them out, if you say just they are all terrorists, etc., they will become terrorists.
Regionally speaking, Dr. Monsef, who do you believe is behind the instability that you have witnessed in Tunisia?
But of course, we have. First of all, we have our deep state, because when you take over, when you become the head of a state, you can the head of the old state, and the old state, the bureaucracy is there, and so in fact you don't control anything, because the deep state is there, and the deep state was our most important enemy. And then you have the outside enemy, and this outside enemy, you do know who is it. I named the Emirates working probably for something else, because the Emirates are representing the old Arab political system, was afraid of those revolutions. They have done everything, to sabotage the transition here in democracy. They have put a lot of money in corrupt media. They have put a lot of money in corrupt political parties, and I can say that they hijacked our democracy, and this is why the counter-revolution has come to power, and this is why mainly the main component of the government currently is in the parliament and in the government is the counter-revolution. This is why the situation is extremely complex.
When you were president, did you try and reach out to the United Arab Emirates or those other countries that were fueling the counter-revolution?
Yes, I did. I met with the foreign minister and even with Bin Zayed himself in one summit. I don't remember which one. And I told them, look, revolution is our own problem. We are trying to solve our own problems. We're not interested in exporting our revolution. But of course, they knew that even if I am sincere, they knew that this revolution would be exported, and this is why they have done everything, and they are doing now everything, to stop this.
So, if you don't mind, when you were speaking with Abdullah bin Zayed or Mohammed bin Zayed?
Yes, with Abdullah bin Zayed and even with Mohammed bin Zayed.
And when you spoke to them, did you ask them what it was, what they were interested in with regards to Tunisia? What was their justification for the stances that Abu Dhabi has been taken?
They didn't have any justification. They just watched me, as I was a curious person, but they didn't even respond to me, because I think they had decided, made up their mind that this revolution should be stopped everywhere, and mainly in Tunisia, because it was the starting point. But I can assure you that they are going to fail everywhere. But 10 years now after the beginning of the revolution, of course, we didn't achieve our objectives. But I can assure you that also the counter-revolution didn't achieve theirs too. Even in Egypt, they are trying to go back to the, to the 50s, but they are not able to go back to the 50s. You cannot stop the flow of history. This is what I am sure of.
In the beginning of this interview, you identified 5 elements that make a revolution. One thing that you may have missed out, if you don't mind, is that for successful revolutions, there needs to be a cost to the previous regime. So you will either find that people were either imprisoned or beheaded or exiled. In Iran, you had it. In France, you had it, and so forth. One of the criticisms of the uprisings of 2011, the Arab Spring, was that all the regimes that existed before, bar Libya, the heads of states were allowed to live on. In fact, they actually probably lived a better life than they did before. With regards to Tunisia, you had Ben Ali given, although he was exiled, he was essentially given protection by the Saudis who still continued. Do you believe that for the revolutions to eventually succeed, there needs to be a cost exerted on the previous regimes and on the deep state?
The second law, I told you that the second law, that after a revolution, you have always a counter-revolution. You have also counter-revolution, whatever you do. I think you can jail them, you can jail, you can kill, you can do everything, but you will have a counter-revolution because this is the normal process, you know, before a society reached its equilibrium. Would have been better choice, you know, to send thousands of people to jail in Tunisia. I doubt, personally, I doubt that would have been make any difference. Also, don't forget that where I come from, I don't come from the military. I don't come from I come from the human rights field. And many of my colleagues, whether Islamist or secular, we have been harassed by the regime. We have been, you know, exiled. We have been put in jail, etc., etc. So we didn't really want to make the same error. We said, look, we are trying to do. Let's try to be, because it is a peaceful revolution. Let's try to behave in a different way.
But they took the counter-revolution took advantage of your peacefulness.
Yes, sure, it took advantage, and this is why. But I do think that we didn't reach the good equilibrium, you know, between repression and between our human rights values. Maybe it was an error, but I do think that because we were a peaceful revolution led by human rights activists, what we have done maybe was an error, but. I'm not sure that if it was otherwise, it would have been much successful because once again, you have always a counter-revolution, whatever you do.
Dr. Munsif, I see behind you the flag of Palestine. When you look at 10 years from the Arab Spring, and you see now these latest normalization deals that are taking place between Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and possibly even Saudi Arabia in the future, do you think that there is a link between the countries who are normalizing with Israel and do you think it's just a coincidence, rather, that the countries normalizing with Israel are the very same countries that have been pushing the counter-revolutions and suppressing the Arab Spring?
No, it's not a coincidence, but it's, and the link is obvious. The link is obvious because all those regimes were and still are extremely afraid of the Arab Revolution because they know that if they have got this Arab Revolution in their own country, it will be the end. And this is why they did everything they could to fuel the counter-revolution. Now, how do I understand the normalization? I think it's the price that those regimes are giving, mainly to the United States and to Israel, to be protected not only from Iran, but also from the Arab Revolution. So it's the price. They are protecting themselves, and they are doing everything to fuel the counter-revolution everywhere, to stop the revolution where it can start, and also you know, to let the Palestinian cause be forget by the Arab nation. So the link is obvious. It's no mystery. But I would say that those regimes, they dare do this normalization because they are no longer afraid of their public opinion. And this could be a major error because all the dictatorship, they never consider that they have a population, they have a public opinion, and they think that they are dealing, you know, with the sheeps. And then they can be very, very much surprised by the weight of their public opinion. So I am not sure that the situation of the leaders of Bahrain or Saudi Arabia is very easy.
I want to end with a final question, which is, we are now going after, on this 10-year mark, obviously the role of the United States can't be understated within the Arab world. There is a new administration that is about to take office. In fact, maybe just 5 days before the anniversary, the 10th anniversary of the Egyptian revolution on January the 25th. If you have a message to that new administration and the incoming president-elect Joe Biden, what message would that be as somebody who is seen as a symbol of the Arab revolutions?
I will say to the President Biden what I said to him when I met him in 2014. At the time, I told him that the revolutions in the Arab world are democratic revolutions, and it's very important for them to get the support of the United States. And I was very shocked because the Western government were not giving enough support, economic support, political support to this revolution, etc. And I remember that he was very, very interested. I think that he was open. I still believe that maybe he won't change much of the U.S. policy towards Israel, but I hope that he would put a lot of pressure on the Egyptian regime, on the Saudi regime, only to release the political prisoner, because this would be the first step. So if the U.S. administration would do this necessary step, maybe they will regain some respect and some confidence from the Arab world. Otherwise, if they still put the pressure only on the democratic government and support Israel and do nothing with the Egyptian regime, I think once again they will miss an opportunity, to regain confidence and respect among the Arabs.
Dr. Monsef Al-Marzouqi, former president of Tunisia, thank you very much for your time.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.